Back again. Anyway, so I think I left off at something like having a conversation regarding, you know, whether there's function or purpose behind evolution, some innate intelligence, it's got the right idea kind of notion. So I left off at something about the moths and something like they didn't really turn color. And the argument is yes, the individuals don't do anything except live or die. And by living or dying, things like blue eyes or green eyes happens. So that's all that really happened with these English moths. Is if you had the right color, you lived. If you had the wrong color, you died. Not very complicated.
Trees that they inhabit. And then what's equally amazing is that then eventually that region in England cleaned its air. It began to kind of like pull the pollution out of the atmosphere, out of the air. And when that happened, the trees began to turn white again. And again, through this DNA process, the moths, the
So it's called a DNA process is sort of be misleading. Through the process of massive attrition, through the massacre essentially, the massacre of the inferiors, through the balance of Gaia, the destruction of the poor little inferior dark moths now, yes, white became dominant. So it's just an expression of a trait. It's not instantaneous evolution.
wings of the moths themselves turned from black to white again. Now this again. These are
So again, to say the moths themselves is just not a good way to say it. Okay, the moths themselves didn't do anything but live or die, and based on who lived and died, the future expressed the survivor's traits.
DNA mutations. They're not like just simply characteristics of the organism as with a chameleon.
It isn't. Yes, it's not like a chameleon because a chameleon has a capacity to, in a very short period of time, to have its mood reflected in its color, which is different, but it's in between those two things. It's not the creation of new attributes, it's just the expression of a capacity that's built in.
Yeah, yeah. For example, like humans put on different clothes. We change clothes with warmer or cold weather. We just change the outside. We just change the clothes we wear to adjust to it. But with these organisms, they that live, in extremely hot and extremely cold places, they have had to adapt to where, without the use of any artificial man-made equipment, they are still able to live because internally their DNA has changed. They grow hair, they lose hair.
Well, again, to say their DNA has changed is just kind of silly, okay? When a cat gets a thicker coat for the winter, its DNA is not changing. It's like it's when your metabolism changes, depending on what kind of food you eat. Food will go through you faster or slower. So based on temperatures in the environment, it triggers a metabolism change, a seasonal kind of change, and but it's not a DNA change. It's an expression of function the DNA possesses, function the DNA gives the cellular organism.
All sorts of stuff like that.
Exactly. So then, all right, with that example, with the example of the moths, with any example that
Those examples demonstrate my point. By the way, I mean you're basically providing evidence of a point different than your own. you know.
relates to DNA, we have to then posit. I mean, like you were saying before, these changes don't happen for no reason. These changes are responses to environmental challenges, to
So again, this is not an example of changes to environmental challenges. These are expressions of traits, which are dominant recessive capacities. Now, changing like sixth fingers or something, or claws, or some other change in our DNA structure happens through the mutation process. So that's the acquisition of traits.
To trying to seek environmental advantages. So then the question.
Yeah, they're not seeking them in any overt way. They're seeking them by default. You won't have them unless you get them, so that makes it sound like you sought it, but you didn't really do it. It's like you have 10 people just walk a straight line in 10 different directions, and you kill 9 of them. Well, the one who happens to be going in the right direction, you can say he sought the right direction. Well, they all sought the right direction. They just failed.
But then the question becomes, so like basically, like, we know DNA is made of chromosomes, of genes, chromosomes, and that the chromosomes are made of like 4 different chemicals that bind to each other in different ways.
I tell you, I can't win. So anyway, I'll be back. Ugh, I hate these automated phone calls. Really. Should be a law against it. I believe there is, but obviously they don't have any penalty for it to discourage the crime. People exercising their, I can't help it. I have to create computer programs to, call people. I didn't have any control over that. My brain couldn't figure out that's obnoxious and fucking disgusting. Oh, bull fucking shit. Their brain couldn't figure that out. Well, there's nothing to say. I mean,
and that's what forms the different genes. Now, we know that, but like I think what we also have to conclude is these DNA, these genes must be communicating with the outside environment.
There you go. That's just the perfect statement, okay? Because this is maybe where you're completely don't get how evolution works. The way DNA in general communicates with the external world, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm the DNA's communication with the external world. I'm the way it gets feedback on what works and what doesn't work. The DNA molecule that I am in possession of will not survive. It's going to be exterminated. So this communication is almost irrelevant. It's just about winner take all. It's just about the fact that the DNA molecules that are in a vessel that's dumb enough to reproduce are the DNA molecules that are going to be replicated. That's it. That's the extent of the communication. The communication is my DNA molecule isn't asking the question, is this a good idea? And expecting an answer, and then it's going to respond and say, oh, you mean this isn't the way it should be? I'll change. No, my DNA molecule is not going to change. My DNA molecule is going to die. And it's everything that it is going to be turned into dust. It's going to be massacred because it's wrong by the standard. And that's it. That's the extent of the communication. The communication is going to be, here's a hammer, you go smush smush. That's it. There's no communication in any, like, oh, let's collect a bunch of information and have a decision. The decision is the default. Whoever's not massacred won the argument.
In order to be able to understand how to change.
See, again, there's no how to change. The changes are all produced, all the variety, all the rolls of the dice are rolled, and then a hammer simply smashes all the rolls it doesn't like, and the ones that are left won. but there was no argument about which one was best. There was no decision about which one was best. They were just merely annihilated by the environment. Period. It's not what you call. That's not what you would call communication, will, decision. There's no processing taking place in any sensible sense of the word. The processing is a blender.
Yeah. It's interesting, and here's a great example, George. I was out at my mom has this friend who has a kind of a farm, and she has some horses. And this lady, I was petting and brushing this horse, and this lady was explaining about their hair, how in the winter they grow this winter coat of fur, but in the summer they shed it. And so there has to be some sort of way of the cells respond.
Yeah, right. Suntan. I mean, I went to the beach and this guy informed me of this interesting phenomenon that if you go out in the sun, your skin changes color. And, I mean, not all that fascinating. I mean, certainly, it's not evidence of what anybody would really call, well, there's evolution in action. No, there's the manifestation of tools in action, of organisms having a capacity to adapt to environments built into their already existing code. But it's not an example of code being written.
Knowing, oh, it's time to start shedding this hair. It's time to start growing this extra coat of hair. So there's something here that I think humans have been ignoring, a fundamental part of nature and the nature of living things.
It's just what your comic book expressions that you've added to reality, and that's all this is. This is fables you're attaching to science. Yeah.
For too long,
people should miss that.
They've just been dismissing.
Exactly, because like with evolution, basically, the general understanding or perhaps misunderstanding is that it's a random process. In other words, it's just like there's no order in it.
Yeah, well, that's not the general understanding. The general understanding is that it's not an intelligent process. The eddy in the stream is not a random process, but it's controlled by crude forces. Evolution is controlled by crude forces. Its definition of the fittest is kind of arbitrary and not relevant to intelligence. Jesus fucking. One of those days, I must say. Anyway, where were we? I don't know, we'll find out. But yeah, you're just misunderstanding evolution.
And that doesn't make sense, because that would be kind of like suggesting that you could like put the materials, let's say, that comprise a building in one geographic area, and then expect them to somehow magically just organize themselves into a
Wow, I mean, that's just so stupid. I mean, that's like something a dumb preacher says about evolution. I mean, it's just so frickin' ignorant. The process takes 4 billion years, and you just sit there and say, "Oh yeah, we just threw a bunch of crap on the ground and it made something." No, it's not how it works. It's little changes over a long period of time, and that's all they are. They're little changes. I mean, sometimes the change is rather dramatic in the sense that things could have 6 legs and then they go to 4 legs by a huge mutation or huge change. And it happens that the individual survives a huge change. Our brains probably split in half that way. Somewhere in our pretty ancient history, there was a mutation that was essentially two-headed. And that's probably why we have a split brain. It was a Siamese individual kind of a thing. Something grotesque like that. And every now and then that stuff happens. But they have such an advantage. They're so much more functional, even though they might be less functional in a lot of other ways. That it's a trait that is keepable, and the negative aspects of the huge mutation, like maybe being crippled or something, will be diluted out through time, but the good part will be kept. That's how evolution works. It doesn't have this pile of tinker toys or parts and it just decides how to put parts together. It makes the parts, one little part at a time.
a structure, and so that it's just an impossibility. So we then have to like conclude.
I mean, like I said, that's just creationist rhetoric. It's no better than creationist rhetoric. It's just demonstrating a hostility and a contempt for the theory of evolution. It's to argue from a preposterous claim. I mean, that's just such an ugly straw man to create, to say that evolutionists believe that, evolution makes pocket watches out of pocket watch parts. It doesn't do that.
That at the DNA level, I think at the cellular level, and also at the level of the organs that make up the human body, certainly at the level of the brain, there has to be process. It can't be random mutation. There has to be.
Well, again, it's breaking. Okay, the breaks are not orchestrated. Again, a cosmic ray flies across the universe and hits a woman's ovary, and then plows through and hits an egg and smashes a bit of crap off of her DNA molecule of the egg. I mean, what else besides random are you going to call that? I mean, it's not an orchestrated, intelligent event. It's a lot of mutations. It's a lot of broken things are birthed into the world to be destroyed. But once in a while, the broken is an advantageous catastrophe. You can't understand an advantageous catastrophe? I don't know how to explain that any better. It's like the planes in 9/11. The plane that went into the building. Well, what if the plane crashed the day before? Now, it would have been a tragedy, but in a sense, it would have been so much better than the plane flying into the building the next day, kind of a thing.
An ordered, purpose-driven intelligence that's guiding these processes.
Now, see, what is that? I mean, this is where it just goes so bad. I mean, it's one thing to sit there and say, Gaia looks all kind of interesting. What an interesting blob the biosphere is. But that statement in itself just sounds like fucking religion. That just sounds like God all over the fucking place. We need a fucking underlying intelligence that's trying to create 10,000 baby sea turtles to have their fucking eyeballs pecked out by birds so one can survive. That's an intelligent plan. Fuck you. I mean, that just is obnoxious to me. I'm sorry. This invention of a fucking idiot God that doesn't have any personality at all and just makes living things to kill. Fuck you. I mean, that's a retarded God. Sorry to get rude, but I mean, that's goddamn religion. That's all that fucking is. That's just made up, completely made up. There's no evidence of your fucking God. There's no evidence of your underlying intelligence to the process of a cosmic ray flying across the universe and smashing into a fucking ovary. That's not what you call intelligence. Fuck.
Yes, I see what you're saying here, because it sort of almost sounds like, who was the name of that philosopher that said, was it Leucippus who said, nothing happens at random, but everything for...
Yeah, for a reason? No. There's no reason. And again, the word random is just the wrong word to use. The fact is there's just a bunch of probability to be expressed, but in a sense, probability doesn't exist either. There is just inevitability. But the truth is that any change to a circumstance can change huge amounts of the inevitability. So I do one little frickin' tap of my finger on the blob before the Big Bang, and all of a sudden there's no Earth, there's no humans, there's no nothing. The universe is just balls of shit banging into each other forever and ever. It's just, that's the fact of it.
For a reason and by necessity? Was
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leucippus, yep.
Yeah, well, you know what? If you've seen the movie Kung Fu Panda, there's Master Shifu, and he's like...
the argument from cartoons. Great.
There are no accidents. You know.
There is no try. There is either do or do not do. Or dog do. I don't. What else? Whatever. The argument from cliches. Ooh, how interesting.
It sounds almost similar. Like people are making it sound like things are, oh, it's just random. No reason. It's just an accident.
Cosmic ray travels 7.3 billion light years across the universe. It crashes into a woman driving to the Walmart to get I don't know, Jiffy Lube, and her ovary gets smashed by the cosmic ray, and it plows through and gets to her little DNA molecule and knocks amino acid number 496,678 off, and that is left with a little dangling deficit that's replaced by just a carbon molecule. There's some other kind of bullshit fills the hole, and now baby doesn't grow whatever, or maybe has a 10-inch, or maybe something. But yeah, that's how it happens. Newsflash.
And I think that's a false statement. I think that's just a dismissal of something they don't understand, and they're not looking into it further. But I'm more than
Yeah, sorry, you're a silly person. Okay, you're the one who hasn't thoroughly hasn't acquired enough knowledge of evolution, biological science, let's call it, and is speaking and talking out of gross ignorance.
happy to look into it.
Exactly. Let's take the analogy, for example, of computers again. You have these like hardware engineers and software engineers, basically doing intelligent experimentation. They're trying like certain materials in terms of like to build the memory for computers and to build the certain components for computers. And a lot of what they tried didn't work. They might try like 1,000 different kinds of materials configured in 1,000 different ways until they come up with the solution, with the answer. And with the software, again, they might try different approaches to various...
Yeah, well, some of that is actually random, okay? I mean, Edison, was carbonizing everything on Earth, and then he fell on the idea of carbonizing a thread for the light bulb. I mean, he had to come up with preposterous ideas and try them just to see. And then sometimes, with the software engineer, I'd say it's a little different because your trial and error is in a very narrow path, because you certainly know there's a lot of stuff ain't gonna work. I hope this program works. There, you can write that in code. You can say, I hope this program works. There's no chance that's gonna make the program work.
Software problems before they come up with the answer, and it's an intelligently driven process, and we can apply this analogy to the DNA.
Well, I'm sorry, it's not an intelligently driven process. It's a gladiator war. There will be winners, there'll be losers. There's no intelligence deciding which one wins or which one loses. It's a fight between swords and weapons and malicious attributes. Have you looked at goddamn nature? Have you looked at the parasites? They suck fucking blood, for fuck's sake. They couldn't be any more overtly aggressive. There's a bug called an assassin beetle. I mean, it assassinates. It sticks it has a face that's basically a fucking hypodermic needle. It sticks it in you and sucks your guts out. I mean, what the fuck? How more overt does it have to be? And you want to call that intelligent? It's intelligent to design tools to eviscerate the other things existing to have your DNA win? That doesn't exactly take much brains to say, well, if I make the fucking sword an inch longer or, a bit sharper, it's going to be a better weapon.
In terms of like this quote-unquote random mutation, basically the DNA is basically somehow being communicated to by the environment.
10,000 baby sea turtles. I mean, yes, that's the communication. It sends 10,000 varieties of the turtle out Okay, and one of them might be able to replicate its DNA, and that'll be declared a good change. That's how it's working. Every individual is subtly broken, is subtly different than every other individual. Even two twins, even though when they're identical twins, they're not really identical. They still have some variation built into the fact that each one of those chromosomes has a different history and has different little bumps on it, little bits of damage.
And it's basically trying to figure out how to best address whatever it's being called upon to address, whether it's like, the need for more food, or
it's not assessing any needs. So again, it is the process of thinking. If you're going to call it a process, it's the processing of a decision. It is not making a decision beforehand. It is the actual event that creates the decision. There's no beforehand deciding. There's only events that decide. Shit.
a more hospitable climate, whatever it is that the environment challenge might be. But again, I think we have to acknowledge that just as like computer programmers and hardware engineers use intelligence to guide their experimentation, the DNA must use a similar kind of...
It must be deciding that, it will put anus next to penis. No, it doesn't, our vagina. No. I mean, there's so many aspects of our own construction that is crap. That we still have this stupid appendix thing. We still have tonsils. We still have these vestigial parts that are just get in the way most of the time. And it doesn't have the knowledge to get rid of that stuff because it's an acceptable liability. So again, wrong. There's still little bones, little tiny bones in the hip of fucking porpoises. They're still there. They wouldn't be there if the DNA molecule was saying ahead of time, well, how can I improve this design?
Intelligence to guide its mutation and evolution.
Hey, yeah.
Guide. There's no guidance. Again, this is where you're just so wrong. Just as our brains aren't guided, there's no guidance. There's cause and effect, there's circumstantial fact, and in the end, there's gladiator decision. There's a decision based on attrition. There's decision based on attrition. There's decision based on attrition. That's how evolution works. It kills the wrong choice. It doesn't say, I don't like that choice. It kills it.
Yeah, to use a more common example...
It exterminates it. It exterminates it.
That more people will understand is Thomas Edison learned a lot of different ways not to make a light bulb until finally found one way that worked.
Again, that's sort of the point, isn't it? That's right. Nature makes a lot of things that go into the world and fail colossally to improve.
That's a perfect example, Chandler.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how the fuck you can't figure this out. If you can understand that Thomas Edison had to waste a million minutes to have one productive minute, that's how evolution works.
Exactly. So in other words, yes, the mutations, there are many mutations, and what works is carried on, and what isn't, what doesn't work isn't. But even like explaining that, so first you have to ascribe intelligence to the process that will determine. Oh,
right. So you're just saying there's intelligence in the process of a 6-foot guy cutting the head off of a 4-foot guy. That's intelligent. But it's not. Okay, it's just not. You're saying there's intelligence in, a hammer smashing an egg. The fact that the hammer always wins. That's somehow an expression of the universe's intelligence. The 10-pound hammer always wins in a contest with the egg. not intelligence. It's just a material fact of a dumb fucking universe.
Well, this is working. Somehow, like, I mean, it could be like in terms of, like, for example, like the organism receives more food, or the organism is, like in the case of the moths, better camouflage to protect their safety from predators. But there's got to be some kind of like an intelligent evaluation of the outcome of these mutations that determines, oh, this is working. This is
Yeah, working for the individual. So again, there's organisms that enslave other organisms. There's organisms that slaughter other organisms. It's to their advantage. It isn't to some working standard or some sensible standard or some logical standard. It's just about making machines that fight in an arena. You're talking essentially about a cockfight or a dogfight or a bullfight, and you're talking about it as if there's intelligence in doing that. No.
this is a correct solution.
So what we're saying here is there is a will, there is a desire of something that an organism wants to achieve, and then the consciousness, the sensory input tells it how much what's happening satisfies that desire or not. And so where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I don't know. Now you're already talking about humans using their scheming brain, a tool, to satisfy their desire mechanism, which is another tool. Oh, that's a different subject, isn't it? Yes, it is.
Chandler, excellent. Yes. So in other words, like there are guiding desires. Just have as we
Guiding desires. Again, this is really duh. I mean, desires in their very nature. That's why they exist. They're motivation mechanisms. They're tools. Organisms that have motivation mechanisms, sticks up their ass saying do it or else, will do it because they don't want the or else.
human beings have like these guiding motivations, drives, the drive to survive.
Yeah, the sticks up their ass. Human beings have a variety of sticks up their ass. Say it that way. Be more honest.
To seek pleasure and avoid pain. That these.
It's pretty much avoid pain. That's all it is. It's avoid the consequences of not satisfying the need, the deprivation. Period. We are out of bliss. We are not seeking bliss. We're trying to regain bliss. Say it again. We're not seeking bliss. We're trying to regain bliss.
These molecules, these cells, these DNA, molecules must have that same kind of will.
Now that's just insane as a statement. The DNA molecule must have desires, it must have an understanding, it must have a mechanism of motivation. Wrong, 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 wrong. Couldn't be more fucking goddamn wrong.
Driven motivation.
Wrong. Again, rocks don't have a motivation to fall down a mountainside. That's called gravity. DNA molecules, it's called chemistry. It's not a motivation.
This is very interesting because...
No, it's a fucktarded waste of goddamn fucking brain space.
This is something that you can observe when watching flies. and they're tiny and they're annoying, but they want your food. They smell your food and they come crawling all over your food trying to eat your food. And I've seen...
They have a brain. They're not a DNA molecule.
This. I've seen that I'm eating something and there's crumbs too small for me to eat from it anymore, but then a fly comes and I just let it have it. Like, hey, it wants to eat it, and I'm like, I'm going to let it have its short happiness.
It's often looking for a place to lay its maggots. It's often not looking for something to eat. It's looking for a place to lay its spawn.
To live for 2 days anyway. So I'm going to let it have its happiness and eat my food,
Absolutely.
But obviously they have a desire for that food. They smell it, and if you...
Yes, they're essentially in the same boat we're in, okay? They have a brain, all right? They're sentient organisms, probably sentient in my opinion. So they're not that much different. They're effectively retarded humans. So you can't there's a big difference between a retarded human and a fucking string of glue. DNA molecule is a string of glue. It doesn't feel, it doesn't think, it doesn't plan, it doesn't do any of that shit.
Trying to swat them, it doesn't work anyway because they see you. They're conscious. They are so conscious, and they have such eyes that when George, that's part of why
it's not all that miraculous, actually. I mean, frankly, I think we can jump out of the way of a hand coming to swat us. We could probably do the same thing.
I see the consciousness of fly, ant, and the bee, and then people say that these babies aren't conscious at 9 months into the.
So he sees flies flying, and he compares it to a baby who can't do a motherfucking thing that seems at all coherent except have poo fall of its ass and piss fly into the air. And he makes a comparison and says, gee, the human baby must be so much more intelligent, so much more conscious. Look how well it functions. Look at how much its brain is doing. What? Pardon me? Sorry, not even close.
Pregnancy or after they're born, they're still not conscious, and I'm like, what have you been smoking?
Yeah, well, what have you been drinking? What have you been eating? Lead?
No, you're completely right.
Yeah, I hear you. Completely right. So, George, right there, I could just say, fuck you all over the place. I mean, this, what, fetus love? I mean, really, in a world, like I said, where fully developed, fully maturated organisms are being eaten by crocodiles every fucking goddamn day, and you're sitting here going to tell me we should be considering the feelings of fetuses. Fuck you. You're an idiot.
All right, Chandler, we've just got about 3 minutes left, so let's encapsulate what we've been saying now. Essentially, we human beings don't have a free will, yet we do many actions, we have many thoughts that we can characterize as purposeful, intelligent, actions and thoughts. And because we don't have free...
I would say there are very few of those. Most of our thoughts and actions are not intelligent. They're stupid, contrived behaviors to satisfy insatiable desires that continually manifest inside of us. And that's all they are. They're just reactions to fucking compulsions.
Well, we can't describe this intelligence to ourselves, so we have to ascribe it to something outside of ourselves. And I think what we've been exploring is the fact that, that at the very small level of DNA, and I think maybe, of chromosomes and genes and all, we can find this kind of same guiding, purpose-driven behavior.
Right, yeah, the water falling down a waterfall. This is not an expression of intelligence. Satisfying desire is not an expression of intelligence. These are just things. You push, there's a reaction. This is just a reactive system, and these are obvious reactions. Lift the water up, what goes up will come down. That's all this is.
Behavior that we must, I think we're compelled to define that behavior also as intelligent.
Yes, I think we have.
Yeah, I just, again, it's an abuse of the word intelligent to call satisfaction of desire a mission of intelligence. You'll use knowledge of an environment, you'll exploit that knowledge, but again, exploitation isn't my definition of intelligent behavior. So again, it's just a kind of a perversion of the words to say that any plan that's self-serving is therefore intelligent. Not close, in my opinion.
I think we really have to look at living organisms, the big and the small, and conclude that there's a will, a desire, an intelligence among each of them. and size.
Yeah, again, this is just so overstated nonsense. There's some rational imperative, there's some obvious truth to the fact that the paramecium has a feeling, sensate consciousness. No such fact exists.
Is really an illusion too, because we're all made up of tinier particles anyway. We're all made up of tiny cells, and so you can't look at an ant or a bee or a fly and say that it's not conscious just because it's smaller. And you can't say that an elephant is more conscious just because it's bigger.
And I don't think anybody relevant to this, anybody I know, is saying that. What they're often saying, though, is that things that can't add fancy numbers are not somehow meaningfully conscious. They're making distinctions between the welfare of certain sentient organisms and other sentient organisms, not based on the fact of how much they feel, but whether or not they can say the words, "You suck, you motherfucker." If they can say, "You suck, you motherfucker," well, then maybe they'll respect them. If they can pick up a knife and throw it and stick it in their eye, well, then they'll respect them. But if they're not capable of doing that, then they won't respect them. And that's not exactly what I would call intelligent.
So, yes, a will and consciousness, it seems to be characteristics of life, living organisms.
Yeah, and I think we might even go further.
You go further, and that you've already gone so far outside the boundaries of reasonable. Clearly, I mean, again, neurons don't exist for no reason. I mean, you people just have no respect for the fact. Neurons make consciousness. Nothing else. Shit.
For example, like the evolutionary changes that DNA molecules are capable of achieving, whether they achieve them over millions of years or over decades, like with the moths, are far more.
Again, it's not a genetic change with the moths. It's not a genetic change in the sense of a creation of a genetic trait. It's just the expression of a trait, which just means it's turned on or turned off. It's a very minor adjustment genetically.
Complex than we human beings can do, with our brains. So yes, we'd have to have, describe these processes as at the very least as intelligent as our human intelligence. Right?
It's just stupid. I mean, all the tools have a complexity to them. Our liver, every organ is complex. The heart is an incredibly sophisticated tool, machine. Just as difficult to build, you could argue, as the brain. But filling the brain is the other part of it, right? Building a brain and then properly programming the brain are two different things. So the brain as an instrument is one thing. The brain as a functioning instrument is another, a useful instrument. Garbage in, garbage out. And you're garbage in, garbage out all over the place.
Handler, we've got about 40 seconds left, so this is something that we have to revisit again and again, because basically, once we understand that free will is an illusion, the next very essential question, the next exploration is fine, if nothing is...
All right, so this is where I won't play. So this is where, it's just no point. We have to do this over and over again, talk about how fantastic life is and how the intelligence of it goes all the way through the universe, and the universe has this innate, wonderful, life-affirming intelligence. No, it doesn't. Alright, do it again. Alright, finishing up and such. Probably mostly. The end and whatnot.
It's really up to us as human beings. Who or what is it up to? And as you were saying before...
Who or what is it up to? I mean, just an amazing statement. The process has done this generating of this biosphere. The earth is green, this whole thing. We know how it got that way. The slime pulled out of the ocean and took over the earth and blah, blah, blah. And there's still a whole bunch of crap going on in the ocean. It's just crap eating crap, and that's all it really is bot against bot, and that's all it is bot wars all over the place. Little machines just fighting with each other for dominance and control and survival. And there's not the intelligence is what we have. We have this tool, this scheming tool. Now we can apply it to, instead of just modeling the simple world in front of me, I can model the universe in my brain, and I can understand the model. I can understand that this infestation of a DNA molecule on Earth is just that. It's an infestation. The molecule divided, and it just kept doing it, and it's still doing it, and had to keep modifying itself so it could eat its own shit, so it could learn how to eat the other players. And there's just nothing to sit there and say, wow, isn't that all magical and wonderful? No, there's a hell of a lot here to lament and to be appalled and disgusted and revolted by. And there's not using the word intelligent to describe such a crude, stupid game. It's just obnoxious. It's like calling some moron from Arkansas intelligent because he can see beauty in a cockfight or a dog fight. That's not an expression of intelligence. Seeing wonder, in oozing blood and, victory over your own kind is not the description or definition of intelligent conceptions.
This has religious implications. This has scientific implications. This has
well, whatever. It doesn't seem to me that you understand the difference between science and religion. It seems you've sort of reversed them. One is, yes, it has an implication to the definition of stupid and smart.
It's basically an understanding of who we really are.
I don't think you have a clue.
Fundamentally.
And that's what it's about. We're trying to find out who we are, why we do what we do.
Yeah, we already know all that crap. I'm just sorry. We know why we do what we do. We know why we're motivated to do these stupid things, eat and fuck. We know why we have an ego, so we can kill each other off to prove who has the biggest dick or the biggest whatever, the biggest sense of humor to impress the ladies. Whatever is the definition of charming at the time. I mean, charming now apparently is some sort of poofterism. But whatever.
Okay, Chandler, thanks. This has been a great episode. We'll be back again with free will, science, and religion.
Yeah, well, it sounds like more of this religion than either of the other two, so whatever. So anyway, happy trails and whatnot, blah, 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 good luck, blah, 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 blah. But not for me, thank you very much. Yeah, there's really nothing else to say, right? There's a whole bunch of steps. There's these little defined ideas steps to getting reality right, and getting evolution right is just one of these steps. This is a fundamentally important thing in understanding the context of our existence. We are byproducts of a process of evolution. We're not byproducts of an inspired design or an inspired idea or some artistic painting by some fricking intelligence in the universe. That's not what we're an expression of. We're a consequence of 4 billion years of biological evolution, which is essentially a 4 billion year long gladiator war. And we're just a tool-equipped tank plowing through the biosphere. Period. And it's important to understand that's the truth. Fuck. Okay, now I'm done. Alright. So till next time, blah 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 blah. Shall I point out? I'm doing an RSS feed for these videos, so I am going to MP3 them all. So maybe I'll leave the link in the description to the RSS feed, the XML file. But you can make it an active link on your browser, which is sort of interesting in Firefox. So see, this says podcast, and then if I click it, there's the new ones. See, I've played this one, so it's gone dark. But these two I haven't played, the MP3s of these two. So it's called an active bookmark or something. But it's, it just does the RSS feed. So it's sort of useful. But anyway, I'll make a website and do some things and blah, blah, blah. But it really is a good idea, I think, to do the MP3 thing. And now they just play in the browser like this. Why not? So I'll work on that too. So anyway, that's the good side of getting into this thing, is that I've acquired some more technical knowledge of content distribution. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Till next time.